Cool. So we will be sharing the recording and slides with all registrants so that you have continued access to the information shared today. I also want to make mention that, technology is a lifelong learning tool. So I apologize in advance for any hiccups we may experience along the way. Since today's session is meant to serve as a resource to you, please feel free to add questions to the chat as you think of them, and we will work hard to respond to them at the end. So today's presentation is a collaboration between UCSC Global Learning and the UCSC African American Resource and Cultural Center, which is part of our system-wide Exploring Your Identity Abroad series. We will be offering various sessions throughout the school year, so visit the link below to see other session offerings. For example, tomorrow, UC Berkeley will be offering a session specific to first-generation college students, so let me add the link to find out more in the chat. And then just quickly, I want to hold space to recognize the original stewards of our land. Many of us in tonight's presentation are in Santa Cruz, have been in Santa Cruz, and that space occupies the unceded territory of the Ama Mutsun tribal band. We encourage you all to learn more about the land in which you occupy at nativeland.ca. So without further ado, we're going to start by introducing ourselves. My name is Ashley Bayman. I use she, her, ella pronouns, and I'm the interim assistant director of advising and outreach at UC Santa Cruz. When I was in college, I studied abroad 3 times, once in Mexico during community college, and then in Brazil and Argentina when I got to the university. And I can tell you that each of my experiences studying abroad were profoundly different. And many of the successes and challenges I experienced were in direct relation to my identities, which is why we're holding this space for you all, because it can be really helpful to think about who you are and how your identities may be perceived in different cultural spaces. So we are really honored to have our 4 panelists share their global learning experiences with you today. So Thaddeus, would you start by introducing yourself?
Yes. Hi, folks. My name is Thaddeus Mamo. I use he, him pronouns. I am a UCSC alumni now, and I graduated studying agri-ecology. I studied in Costa Rica for 2 different programs, in the spring of 2023 for a tropical biology and conservation program, and then in the summer doing an eco-entrepreneurship program also in Costa Rica. And just fun fact, I did it with Paradise, and so to do it with the second time, so to do it with someone that you knew, that I actually knew, and was also ABC identifying folk, definitely made the experience a lot easier. Thank you, and I'm glad you're all here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kyra, pronounced she, her. I'm a film and digital media major here at UC Santa Cruz and currently a senior. I studied in Australia this past spring and winter quarters, and I'm planning on studying abroad again this upcoming summer, film and history and preservation in Bologna, Italy. Very excited about that. I'm actually a peer advisor here at the Global Learning Office. I was a Black Academy mentor 2 years in a row, and then my freshman year I was in Black Academy as a mentee, as well as African American mentorship program. And I'm very excited you all are here.
Hi everyone. My name is Mary Ainwale. Sorry if my voice sounds really bad. I'm recovering from a cold, but I go by she, they pronouns. I'm a plant sciences and agroecology double major, and I am currently a senior here at UCSC. I studied in the Mediterranean France program for summer 2023. And I had a lot of fun, but it did pose its own set of challenges, which we can get into later. But thank you for having me here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Paradise. I am a UCSC alum. I just graduated, and I did community studies, press, and politics. And then I had the opportunity to study agroecology in Cuba. And then this past summer, social and eco entrepreneurship in Costa Rica. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Look forward to hearing about your experiences in a little bit. So we want you all to know the general structure of today's community discussion. So we are first going to discuss the benefits of participating in global learning program, as well as talk about how to overcome specific barriers to studying abroad or away, for example, finances. We will then finish by discussing successes and challenges that our ABC panelists experienced in different cultural contexts, and of course, open it up to our panelists to answer any questions that you all may have. So I first want to set the stage for our discussion by sharing the most up-to-date data we have on global learning participation nationwide. As you can see here, out of the students who studied abroad in academic year 2021, which was a different year because of COVID and all the things, but 32% of those students identified as racially or ethnically diverse. And of the 32%, only 4.1% identified as African American or Black. So we really want to create, awareness about global learning, because we want this to be an experience accessible to anyone who is interested, especially our ABC students. So next, I'm going to pose the question, why should you participate in global learning anyway? Obviously, from here, you can see a long list of academic, personal, and career benefits, ranging from things like personal growth, learning a new language, developing new relationships, complementing your UC studies, career preparation, etc. But some that I want to personally point out is that it really allows you to learn both inside and outside of the classroom. And honestly, I think when you study abroad or away, you learn more outside the classroom because you're interacting with the culture in real time and seeing various historical landmarks and meeting so many people that really bring your academic studies to life. It also gives you the chance to experience a new culture. When we consistently stay in our own cultural bubbles, sometimes we're not exposed to new ways of thinking and living. And then finally, it helps you clarify your interests and life goals. For example, when I was in college, I studied Latin American and Latino studies, Spanish and Portuguese. And honestly, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my degrees. But after studying abroad, I realized that I really wanted to help others pursue these kinds of life-changing experiences because they impacted my life so much, which is why I serve as a global learning advisor today. But there are specific reasons why we see your fellow ABC students participating in global learning. For example, some go to connect with their heritage or engage with other African diasporic communities. Others have gone to explore their own identities, and others have gone simply because they wanted to experience life outside the US. And to us, representation matters, period. So I want to bring these examples to life through the voices of other ABC students. So in looking at heritage seeking and participating in African diasporic communities, Chelsea, who was one of my former students who study abroad in Barbados, said that, looking back, I'm so happy I didn't stop myself from getting on the plane. I learned more about myself, made lifelong friends, and enjoyed being immersed in a new culture. I truly love taking classes and learning the history of Barbados, surrounded by Black students, educators, and staff. I was able to learn what Blackness meant to people from the Caribbean and how it differed from my perceptions. Being Black, I found similarities with lots of peers. However, we face different challenges with navigating our Blackness due to where we grew up. Learning that being Black doesn't have to fit into one way of being was so validating to me. Next, we have Shaylin, who is also one of my students who studied abroad in Ghana. And he said that he was grateful to explore his own identity abroad, but I'm going to let him share that with you in his own words.
Some of the biggest lessons I took away while studying abroad was I learned a lot about myself, learned about my heritage and my journey coming from America back to Africa. I learned a lot about my ideals and Pan-Africanism. So another takeaway I had was that being a Black American, I lost my history. I lost where I came from. So being in Ghana, I found a place of home, a Black home that was welcoming, and I didn't feel in danger at all.
That cut off early, but he said he didn't feel in danger at all times. And I think that's a really important story. So finally, Toulouse, who went to France as a robotics engineering major, shares in this video about how, having gone herself, she has encouraged her fellow Black peers to also explore global learning, which is how we increase representation. When we see more of us doing it, we're encouraged to do so also.
So studying abroad as a Black woman was definitely an interesting experience. And I think it's because of the fact that I didn't see or hear of many Black people studying abroad that I felt like it was something that just wasn't accommodating or accepting of me. And I really had to get over a lot of these thoughts so that when I got there, I can make sure I was making the most of the experience and not standing in my own way because of my insecurities, and making sure that I was forging a path for other people of color, other Black people that felt like study abroad was not something for them. And I'm really happy because even now, since I've been back, I've had friends that are reaching out to me and they're interested now, and it's something that's on their radar and that they're considering, which I don't think would have been a thing if they hadn't seen me do that. So studying abroad as a Black.
All right. So you heard from a few of our students. We'll hear from more ABC alumni in a bit, but we're going to transition to exploring what we believed are perceived barriers to participating in global learning and how to overcome them. Can't stop, won't stop. So barrier number one, I'd say this is one of the most common barriers we see, and it's that most students don't feel that they can afford to study abroad or away. So for that, I want to say that first, California itself is a very expensive place to live, as we all know. The cost of living in California is 42% higher than the national average, and housing alone is 101% higher than the national average. So you could actually save money by studying in a place where the cost of living is less expensive than California. Moreover, all UC students going on a UC program can take their financial aid with them. As long as you're participating on a UC program, like the UC Education Abroad program, your financial aid in many cases will adjust to meet your program costs. So as an example, if you receive 80% of your UC tuition and fees are covered through financial aid, about 80% of your global learning costs will also be covered by financial aid if your program takes place during the academic year. Many UC financial aid offices can actually give you an estimate of how much aid you will receive in grants, loans, etc. So I encourage you to meet with them. What's more is that there are so many scholarships available. I know that, Mary and Thaddeus got some scholarships to go in their program. I will say that most scholarships have different eligibility requirements, and these can range from being a Pell Grant recipient to studying on a specific program like UCEAP. Just make sure you meet with your campus study abroad office to identify scholarships that may be a good fit for you. So on this slide, there are just a few examples of low-cost study away locations where you can actually save money on things like housing and groceries and just everyday necessities. So, please feel free to meet with us at Global Learning or your campus's study abroad office to explore, low-cost locations. Another barrier students encounter is that, they're concerned that by participating in global learning, it can delay their time to graduate. And I just want to share that, research actually shows that participating in global learning increases college retention rates because many students who come back are reinvigorated and are passionate about continuing their academic pursuits and engaging in lifelong learning. First, if you participate in a UC Global Learning program, you receive UC credit, so that automatically goes on your transcript and counts towards the total units you need to graduate. Second, many students take courses that fulfill major, minor, GE, or elective credit, which helps you actually stay on track to graduate and may even allow you to complete graduation requirements sooner, for example, if you go on a summer program. Third, there are many different kinds of programs such as discipline-specific, research, fieldwork, and internships that really allow you to take advantage of doing something that you may not get the chance to do by staying on campus alone. And then fourth, at many UC, students are required to meet with their major, minor, and college advisors in order to get approval to participate. So they will make sure that you're staying on track to graduate on time as well. The final barrier I want to present is that sometimes we may feel like our loved ones or parents won't approve of us participating in global learning. So for that, I just want to say that understanding is key. It's important that when you talk to them, you're well informed on the logistics of your program. So first, they will definitely want to know about the financial implications. So be sure to explain to them about financial aid, the program costs, scholarships you can apply to, and the budget you're making for yourself. Also, in today's day and age, safety is one of the top concerns for most of us. So make sure you are armed with, health and safety information on the location you're going to. Next, for loved ones, I think it's really important that they understand how this experience benefits you. So one thing you could share are the professional benefits. There are studies that have proven that global learning students have increased higher ability rates after graduation and have a bigger social and professional network that they connect you to, to future career opportunities. And then finally, I think it's important that you feel prepared when engaging in this conversation. So, make sure that you've done your research on your program and location. If your loved ones are hesitant, be sure to keep calm and acknowledge their objections or concerns. You may also need to be flexible so that your loved ones feel they are included in the decision-making process. So for example, if you were thinking about doing a year program, but they don't want you gone for that long, you could consider doing a shorter summer or quarter program. All right, so now let's transition to talking more about identity abroad and away. What I'm going to present to you next are some of the challenges students have identified that made them think more deeply about their own identities and how those come to light in different cultural contexts. So the first thing students share that they are surprised about when participating in global learning is that rather than being identified by their race or ethnicity abroad, their host community emphasizes their nationality. While I think our American identity may not define us while we are in the US, when we are outside of California or abroad, it may be one of the most salient parts of our identity. Now, I understand that as Black Americans, some of us may have complicated feelings about our relationship to the US. And so abroad, it may be difficult and confusing identifying and confronting your Americanness. For example, some key American values that we hold are things like free speech, independence, equality, directness, informality, and individuality. These may be similar or very different from your host community's cultural norms. So in some cases, you may find yourself in the position of defending American culture, something that you may also critique while at home. Obviously, in the previous slide, we showed that you may feel more American based on your underlying values abroad. But another challenge could be that others might think that you don't look American because there are pre-existing racial notions of what Americans should look like. Many times, these generalizations are based on ignorance rather than prejudice. And depending on where you go, you may literally be the first Black person someone meets. So when you share with host locals that you're American, there may be a follow-up question such as, yes, but where are you really from? Let's listen to this student sharing his experience in England.
My last thing is that being a Black American in England, I think, or maybe just in Europe, but specifically here, because a lot of people ask me more here than anywhere else, is like, are you really American? Like, what do you think American looks like? Like, they have this concept that Americans are like white. That's problematic. Like, they ask me, like, I'm like, oh, American. They're like, oh, but what really are you? It's like, so when America said that, that would be so racist. Next question is like, are your parents American? It's like, yes. Oh, are their parents American? Yes. They were all freaking born here. Unless you go back 200 years ago, then they weren't. They're like, oh, well, you look Caribbean, or you look like you're from Somalia or like South Africa. And I'm like, yes, well, I'm pretty sure somewhere down the line in my history does go back there. But just because my skin color is that way now does not mean I'm not American. I was born in America. I'm full-fledged American. Like, oh, like how'd you get to America? Like, why are you over there? It's like, what do you think America's comprised of? Like, it does not make any sense.
Obviously, that's just one student's experience, but in cultural communities, you may find that. So the next thing I want to say is that marginalization also shifts in different cultural contexts. So many of the more than 300,000 students going abroad hold the privilege of having an American passport or attending college in the United States. I'll say that it can be jarring and even make you feel guilty of having this privilege compared to others in your host community. For example, in some other countries, not all folks may be able to access higher education, especially when considering gender inequality. In other countries, because you have access to the US dollar, that can come with economic privilege of the dollar being stronger than other currencies. Also, as I mentioned earlier, because if you're going to a location with a lower or much lower cost of living than California, you'll find that host locals' economic accessibility looks much different than yours, even if you consider yourself a low income or high financial needs student in the US. So finally, I want to touch on race and discrimination abroad, as they can be a major concern for many students. I'll say that racism and discrimination can take many forms while in your host community. Here, I listed some examples of how race may come into play while abroad or away, but this is not an all-inclusive list by any means. So the first is having comments made about your appearance. Some students have said that in some locations, they have been miscategorized as belonging to other marginalized racial groups. So in this example, a student was thought to be Roma, which is an ethnic group from northern India, while they were in Italy, although, of course, they were American. The second is experiencing fetishization or objectification. So in this example, you can read here, a student was uncomfortable with the unwanted attention they were receiving in China. Locals were asking to touch their hair and take pictures of them. And I can share that this actually happened to me once when I was leading a group in Mexico. So we were all at the mall, and I had 2 students who had box braids during the summer. They put in a protective style for the summer. And we saw a group of locals trying to sneak to take pictures of us. So I went up to them, as I speak Spanish, and asked what they were doing. And they said that they had never seen hair like that in person. They weren't intending to be rude, but I did have to ask them to not take pictures of us. The third is experiencing language discrimination. So this may be more prevalent in locations where you look like the host community majority. So in this example, a student in Botswana was shamed for not speaking the host language, as host locals thought that they were native. Personally, I can share that when I studied in Brazil to learn Portuguese, locals would immediately communicate with me in Portuguese because they thought I looked native, and then would be surprised when I responded in my broken Portuguese at the time. The fourth is racial isolation. So sometimes you may find that you're the only ABC student in your program, and this can be frustrating, as there may not be another ABC student who you can navigate the new culture with and share the experience. Here, a student who studied in Spain said, so it was I really didn't have that other bond with someone that could understand the same experience, because my experience was completely different from everyone else's, because there were other Hispanics, there were other Asians, there were other whites, there were no other Blacks. So it was just me. So I don't have anyone that can share, people who, can understand your plight and what you're doing and what you're going through. And finally, of course, there are other overt forms of racism and discrimination, and that might come as, microaggressions from other peers in your program, as well as host country locals, harassment, and discrimination based on intersecting parts of your identity, from whether that be religion to sexuality. Now let's touch on some successes and challenges that students have experienced while in different cultural communities. So on this slide, you can see a map of the areas in the world that have the highest concentration of ABC populations. So when in communities with a majority Black population, students have shared the following successes. First, being able to connect with their heritage and learning more about how Blackness is experienced in a majority culture, like how Chelsea shared while in Barbados. The second is being part of the majority for the first time, because other folks share similar, racial characteristics like skin color. The third is gaining a deeper understanding of self, like what Shaylin shared at the beginning of the presentation, who studied in Ghana. And the fourth is hair slaying on a budget. So when you're a majority Black community, hair care is way more affordable and accessible because it's not considered exotic. It's just a normal part of the culture. Some of the challenges in these communities might look like cultural dissonance, where you are not considered Black enough, or don't feel accepted or a part of the culture. The next is unmet expectations by not being accepted in the way you were hoping, either because of your nationality, background, or other things. This can also happen if a student feels exploited because they are American, or if white peers receive more attention than them because that's the minoritized group. And the final one is having to repress other parts of your identity. So I'd say this is especially true for LGBTQIA plus folks, in particular African countries where LGBT rights are not protected and even infringed upon. But you may also find yourself repressing, for example, your religious identity if you're not a part of the religious majority. In other parts of the world, these successes and challenges may be similar or different. In terms of successes, we've had students share that while abroad or away, they experienced racial freedom in which their skin color didn't matter, but their nationality came more into play, like we discussed. Another success is cross-cultural learning and just really seeing how African-American culture has spread throughout the rest of the world. For example, seeing, hip hop groups in Korea, or eating collard greens made in a different manner in Brazil. I personally was so happy to see all the different forms of what we consider soul food staples while I was studying abroad in Brazil. Like they loved okra and greens and neck bones, which I was ecstatic about. And then finally, students have reported just feeling, empowered because they were able to successfully move their bodies and belongings through foreign spaces. So in terms of challenges, we touched on this a little bit ago, but anti-Blackness can be a big one. For example, here I share that in Europe, many African immigrants and refugees are stigmatized against, and students may be misidentified as belonging to these marginalized groups. There's also stereotypes that, we may have to combat. So some people think that when they see a Black person abroad, a Black American abroad, it's because there's some kind of celebrity who can afford to travel. In fact, I actually had a student who studied in Hong Kong, and he said everyone would stop him to take pictures because they thought he was a famous basketball player. And he didn't even play basketball. He actually liked soccer. The other challenge I'd say is with many places, especially here in Santa Cruz where I live, Black hair care can be limited or non-existent. So it's really helpful to plan ahead for this or wear a protective style. And finally, as we mentioned earlier, racial isolation can be a difficult experience to manage, which is why it's important to learn ways to, really find community abroad and maintain communication with friends and family back home. So now I know I have talked a lot, so I'm happy to pass the mic over to our panelists to share some of the successes and challenges they experience as ABC students in their host community. Thaddeus, let's start with you.
Thank you. To start, I think for me, my first program, one of my biggest successes was really being able to speak Spanish at a more fluent level. And then also living with a Costa Rican family for 2 weeks. So having to have that direct interaction of using my Spanish throughout my days, even besides the day-to-day of meals and whatnot, but actually just to have conversations and to get to know people. And so in that, being able to connect with the other local Costa Rican families, and then as you can see in the bottom left picture, driving a boat, because we built that relationship to where they would feel comfortable to let us or teach us how to drive their boat. So that was very comforting, because I also didn't feel like, at least in my experience, they treated me any different for how I looked compared to other experiences I might have had within Costa Rica. And it never became a topic of conversation or anything like that. So and maybe that was because I spoke a little Spanish or for what other reasons I don't know. And then in my second program, let's see, success within being an ABC student, I think just being a leader and like facing adversities that could have made me angry, that Paradise was there to experience with me, and instead taking that experience and actually like finding another Black man who lived in Costa Rica, and then actually talking to him about his experience, and learning that that was like a very isolated experience, and that's not how a lot of Black people are treated within Costa Rica. So it's kind of the success and challenge, but yeah, within the challenge aspect, it really was kind of like more of a one-time incident, or sometimes actually dealing with professors who honestly use Africa as a way to talk about like poverty, when and they can be from America, and instead of focusing on other parts of the world, like there's poverty within America, but rather using Africa to appeal to another audience of like what poverty is. So like, so to me, I try to find the success, or like the better part about that, in that these people might be misguided, and that's best. This is where I can show like really what my culture is, and like what it means to be an ABC student, and that I'm not gonna be angered, or at least show them the anger that in a way that isn't necessarily productive, and rather be very like serious about my craft and my work, and let the work do the talking for itself. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Thaddeus. And then we'll pass the mic to Kyra.
Yeah. So for successes, just having to do with being an ABC student abroad, in Australia specifically, one that surprised me is that coming from the US, obviously I've had like my fair share of incidences having to do with like medical racism. And over there, I had like the best experience with healthcare ever in my life. It was like so easy and like affordable, but also like my doctor was just so sweet and like made sure that like I was a priority, which was amazing as like an international student and also just a person. That was new. Um, I also just felt very safe over there. Like it was a really interesting experience because I had never really left the country at all before, let alone live somewhere else. And like in Australia, like guns aren't legal, so that's definitely part of it. Like the worst that's gonna happen is like, I don't know, maybe someone pulls a knife out, but it's like, then what? And that was rare too. So I felt pretty safe just walking around like at night, even as a woman, was cool. Um, and then even like, I mean, I still obviously was careful and not overly trusting, but I didn't have the same sense of like dread around like police that I do here, because it just was different over there. It's just not as crazy. Um, and then challenges, there was just such a huge lack of a Black community. Like I think I was there for 5 months, and I think I only met like 3 other Black people my entire time. And 2 of them were people studying abroad from New York, and then one of them was a boy from London. And then other than that, like it was just kind of rare to see us around. And because of that, like people would like stare at us and like ask us questions about, I think like the moment I stepped into the airport, I got stopped and this lady was like, how do I get my hair to look like yours? And I was like, oh, it's just like that. I don't know. And so there was a lot of that for sure. And it didn't necessarily feel like threatening or like weird or anything. I think it genuinely was like curiosity and like interest. There definitely were some instances where it was uncomfortable. Like this woman stopped me one time in the supermarket and she was like, "Hey, my husband sent me over here to ask you how to get my hair like yours." And I was like, "What? Like I'm a child." Like they were like way older than me, so that was strange. Um, and then like kind of how Ashley was saying, like sometimes people want to take pictures and stuff. And I didn't have any like super strange things where people were taking pictures of me without asking, but my friends and I traveled to Indonesia over our spring break, and there was some people who like asked us to take pictures, and we were like, all right, sure. Like it felt very homeless. But oh my gosh, I just remembered too, this man stopped me one time and he was like, "Are your curls natural?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then he was like, "Good girl." And I was like, "What? What?" So that was crazy and took some getting used to. And then hair care, yeah, that was pretty much non-existent for like curly hair that wasn't like white curly hair because there just weren't very many of us enough for there to be a real market for it. And then if there was, it was very expensive. Um, and yeah, there was just a lot of like ignorance to having to do with like Black people because it was interesting. I didn't necessarily expect, I mean, I should have. I just didn't ever think much about it. Like, I was going through a country where they have their own people that they like historically traumatized and like did terrible things to. So that was their like people that they were like the Aboriginal people of Australia, like they use like the N-word for them and like there's all these terrible things. And it's like the equivalent of like being Black in America. But because I'm not like Aboriginal, they didn't even know to be racist to me, honestly. So that was really interesting. Yeah, just being able to like witness similar practices happening, but like not towards my group of people for once was very odd. Um, but overall, like I I met so many amazing people out there, and like I think people were more often willing to make fun of me for being American than like the color of my skin or anything like that. Like that was mostly like the jokes. And I met so many people from all over the world, and like I now have like a global network of people that I can visit and they can visit me. And I learned so much about different cultures, and it was just incredible.
Great. Thank you so much, Kai. Now we'll pass it on to Mary.
Yeah, some successes, I guess, was like I saw a lot of success for me in the academic space. Like taking my classes as someone who was like American, but also someone who's like an immigrant, like born somewhere else before I moved to America. It was really interesting to kind of interact with like learning about a different country and like learning about their struggles and having a dual perspective in a way that other students didn't. And my professors were like, "Oh, yeah, like I didn't expect someone who has lived most of their life in America to be able to understand why that is that way." And I was like, "Yeah, that's true, but at the same time, like majority of my life has been here, but I do have some limited experience of, as much as it sucks to say, America has a very isolated educational curriculum that other countries don't." And so that was an advantage for me. Um, I guess also like a success was just I used to speak French as a child. I don't anymore, but still like learning that I could still pick some stuff up if somebody was speaking to me. Generally, of course, I couldn't respond back, but I would like kind of understand what they were trying to say, or like reading instructions and like a train station or something like that. And I'd be like, "Oh, I think it's telling us to like go left and the bathroom's like down the hallway." So I was able to kind of navigate the space somewhat independently without feeling like I was gonna completely fall apart. Um, Challenges, the city I was staying in, Marseille, is definitely not known for being like the most, it's definitely like its own kind of, it's rough out there. I will say. It's not exactly like you could go out at night and have fun. Um, they're just, it's it's a big ghetto. I'm not gonna it's a great city. I'm not saying that you shouldn't visit, but it's just like do be aware that, yeah. Um, so that was a challenge. A challenge was also just getting heckled. Um, it was less to do like with like the color of my skin, because Marseille is actually very, very diverse. It's very like multicultural. Like it wasn't that I wasn't seeing Black people or people that were like Middle Eastern. Like it was definitely not that. Um, it was just the culture there for, I think, men is different, and the way that they approach women is different. And so just trying to like walk to class, because our um class was like about like a 10-15 minute walk, and sometimes you would just be minding your own business and they would just start like heckling you, and it's like, I understand that you are trying to probably mean that as a positive, but it comes off as very aggressive and very like unsafe for me and whoever was like walking by me. So that was just like, please, like I just want to go to class. um yeah, that was kind of the main downside, and just like, yeah, feeling generally like that the city was just too rough to navigate at night. But other than that, like I had a great time. I felt like I had a great time. It was definitely like an upside to like not feel like I was being attacked for my skin color, which I know would have been different if I visited a different part of France, because not all of France is like Marseille. Um, Marseille is definitely like, I think, one of the few exceptions in France of being so multicultural, because other parts of France are so like homogenous, and they are dealing with like their own version of the Black Lives Matter movement in France actively. Till now there is a lot of racial hate, but it was like nice to stay in a space where it was a problem that everyone was aware of, but a majority of people didn't have to deal with, because people of color were the majority within the city. So that was really nice.
Great. Thank you for sharing your experience, Mary. And now we'll pass the mic over to Paradise.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess like similar to some folks that shared, some successes for me was kind of just like seeing the topics that I was like really passionate about or interested in being offered. So I was like interested in like learning about like food systems, and like agroecology. And so I was like, okay, now I get to go here. And I think that was like my first time like doing an independent study and like doing research, and like connecting with folks like in Cuba and learning about their experience. So like doing like community research and stuff like that. That was like a really good experience. I think also like making lifelong friends. Like in the first time I studied abroad, I was the only Black person. And the second time it's just me and Thaddeus. So it was really nice to have like folks that kind of understand like similar backgrounds. A lot of people I went with were like from LA or like California. So it was like nice to have folks from similar backgrounds. Some other successes was like the chance to like practice Spanish. And then I would say in like Cuba, there's like more of like a nighttime life. So it was like practicing like dancing, and things of that nature. So that was really fun. And then I love exploring or like going to museums and things of that nature. So it was like really nice to kind of like see like innovation and like creativity that folks had. So yeah, it was like a really good experience. Some challenges, I would say, like studying abroad. Kind of already mentioned them. But like anti-Blackness and like microaggressions, I experienced them in like both experiences. And then I would say, at least like for my last program, I would say like a lot of folks were like kind of just like US center or like North American like centered. And so like kind of unpacking that. And then I would say for like primarily like the last one, but like a little bit in the first experience was like kind of like a lack of like centering like ABC spaces on like, cause like when I went to Cuba, we could have went to um like Santiago or like different places, like ABC spaces. But like towards the end, like when I'm like raising my voice, like, okay, like we need like to explore these different places. So like kind of like during the trip, like me speaking up and they're like kind of make an effort. So I feel like, or that's like something I was like put back on the feedback form. Is like when they're like coming up with like these like going to different places and they know, even if they don't know if like there's gonna be ABC students there, but like finding way to incorporate that into the program, and not just like waiting for like a student to like do some research and explain like why it should be centered. Other than that, I think I had a really good time. I enjoyed my experiences. Yeah, I think that's all I'll share.
Thank you, Paradise, and thank you all for sharing. Some of you have similar successes, like, being able to practice a language, um, just taking yourself in a new cultural space independently, and then, some similar challenges related to your identity. I mean, this space here is for us to kind of share with prospective students, maybe students who are about to study abroad, what this might be like. Nothing can fit into one box, but by creating these spaces now, it kind of empowers us to find spaces later, as Paradise just mentioned, for where we can, more so find community when we're outside of California or the United States. So now I really want to open it up to the audience. Right now we have about 10 minutes left where you can put questions that you might have for our panelists in the chat box. I know some of you are in an in-person space at ARC, so Egypt, feel free to, unmute yourselves and ask questions that way. I had come up with some questions for our panelists in case the audience didn't have immediate questions. So yeah, please feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat or just unmute yourself. I'll get started just by asking Thaddeus. I'm wondering, you did 2 programs back to back in spring and summer. How were you able to fund your global learning programs?
So starting with the spring program, I am or was a Gilman scholarship recipient. And so through that funded a lot of the spring, but also received the UCEAP, one of the UCEAP scholarships as well. So that definitely helped a lot on the side of what I had for financial aid. So some of that rolled over to my summer program, but also just there's, aside from scholarships that are whether like outside of the university or coming from the programs, you can also get scholarships like through your major. So you always want to check for that, and also scholarships possibly through your colleges. So you just gotta talk to people and ask. And one of the big what's the word I'm looking for? Mottos. Mottos is not the word. I can't think of the word. But just if you want to apply for something, don't do it because you don't think you're gonna get it, but just like let them say no. And one thing I've learned is a lot of people for that reason don't apply. So although there's qualifications, some people kind of just count themselves out. So just shoot for it, and yeah, there's a good chance you not just may be lucky, but you're deserving of the scholarship.
Thank you. Paradise, I'm wondering, how did your family react to you wanting to participate in global learning, not once, but twice? Did they have any like hesitations or objections? And if so, how'd you overcome those?
Yeah, they were excited, also a little nervous. The first time I studied abroad, I had a little accident and I like dropped my phone in the ocean. So we were like not in contact that much. But like one of my roommate, we were like just like sharing her phone. So that was like a little hesitation. They were like, oh my gosh, because we're very close, like me and my family. And so the second time we like use like WhatsApp a lot. And I would say they're like really excited and like just like kind of been like, okay, like we know like places that we can like go to, like if we ever like want to do like a family trip there. I think, let's see. I think yeah. So like one of the worries was, I don't know, like, you watch TV, so you never know what can happen. So like when I went to Cuba, they're like Trump was like, oh, like we're gonna like American US citizens can't go to Cuba. And so that was like a hesitation. And so that was like one thing they were like, okay, like are you gonna go? Or you're not gonna go? So that was like one like hesitation. I think another one, like the second time, I like really wanted to go to Kenya. Was like public health background, but that ended up getting canceled. So then I ended up doing the one in Costa Rica. And so they were like, okay, this is a little different. But I was just kind of explaining like what I wanted to get out of the program. So they were really excited about that. But yeah, I think it's just like, yeah, just like communicating, giving updates, and like sharing like videos is like what worked really well for me. I do see someone has their hand up, Hermione.
Yeah, thank you for recognizing that.
Oh, hi. I didn't realize you guys were going through the questions.
No, we were just asking
Okay.
questions while the audience thought of their questions. So please feel free.
Yeah, well, thank you. My name is Harmony. I'm a fourth year political science major, and I'm interested in studying abroad, possibly spring or summer. And Brazil is always somewhere I've always wanted to go. So actually, when I heard you that you mentioned you did a program there, I just wanted to learn more about your experience and how you were able to do that.
Yeah, thank you. I was trying to write something in the chat, but I love Brazil so much. I think it's probably one of my most favorite countries I've ever been to, just because it's also vibrant there. I mean, the culture is like really vibrant. When I went to study abroad in Brazil, my first time I went, we were on a program and we were learning about, like the political history, economic history, social history in the country. And I didn't know at the time that I went that Brazil is the country that received the most enslaved folks during the African slave trade. In fact, 40% of all Africans were taken to Brazil. So the country is it's a very mixed race country in which, like you have like skin colors on every spectrum that you can think of. You have some families who, have in the same family with the same mom and dad, some, children with like dark skin, some with lighter skin. It was just really, for me, crazy to see how mixed race the country is because of that history. So learning about, all of like the traditions in Brazil that are really like rooted in the African communities that were brought there was really interesting, like from like religion to food to dance to music. It just felt very lively and rich and like I don't know if I'm saying this word right, vivacious. I don't think that's a word, actually. I think I'm mixing vibrant and something else. But anyways, it is just one of the most amazing places that I've ever been. The food is so good. They have so many different fruits, and the fruits are in so many different colors, and everyone is just very lively. I mean, from how they talk to you on the street to how they engage with you at the restaurant. It's just, it's a very unique experience that I haven't experienced in any other country that I've been to. And I've been to about 30 some countries because I backpacked around the world after I graduated because I didn't know what to do with my life after graduating. So if you have any interest in Brazil, please holler at me. My contact information is going to be on the last slide. And I also sent to you privately a link to a UCEAP program in Brazil during the summer that I'm a big fan of. So
Nice. Thank you so much. Yeah, I definitely have a lot more questions. But yeah, thank you for answering that. I'll definitely follow up.
Of course, feel free to ask any questions that you have. Anyone else in the audience have any questions for me or the panelists?
Yeah, someone in the comments asked, would the panelists be willing to share the names of the specific programs they participated in? Also, is there any sort of formal or informal way to learn which programs in which ABC participants have had mostly affirming experiences? Well, I can start off by saying that I went to Brisbane, Australia through UCEAP, and it was the University of Queensland. And that's just what my program was called.
I'm going to try to
Anyone else
put
want to share
everyone's
theirs?
programs in the chat, like links to the program pages.
Okay, perfect.
Let's see. Ideas.
I guess I can say I went to, my program was called Mediterranean France, and it was 2 classes. One was history and one was about politics. And so one was kind of just exploring like the history of like Mediterranean France, and then what was talking about like the politics of modern France in relation to that like historical legacy. So it's very interesting to like take the 2 classes side by side, because one was very much so just giving context of like why like the country is the way it is and like the previous relationships, while one was like exploring like philosophical, like it was very interesting. But yeah.
Yeah, I did the agroecology practicum, and then I also did the eco and social entrepreneurship in Costa Rica. And I would say I like saw some of my friends like photos and like the study abroad. So I know my best friend Chelsea, she went to Barbados and had a really good experience. And I had about like 3 to like 4 friends from UCSC and like UC Davis who like went to Ghana, and they had like a really good experience like taking classes as well. So if you don't have like a chance to do like Black Studies, CRES, or anthropology classes, like you can take classes like in Ghana or other places.
Thank you. And yeah, just one thing I'll share, because I've worked with a handful of ABC students in my 6-year tenure now as a staff at UC Santa Cruz, is surprisingly, I've had some students, like panelists before, say, you know, I went to England because I wanted to go to a place where they kind of spoke English and where it'd be like a more comfortable cultural transition. And then my friend went to Ghana or South Africa, and they just were living in like Black paradise. So I would say just, you know, like, I'd say when you're thinking about like what type of global learning program you want to do, there's a lot of different things to consider. And you might have like an idea of, oh, I want to go here. But then after speaking with a global learning advisor, and once we're like really defining, like, what are your personal goals? What are any professional goals you have? What are your academic outcomes you want to achieve? We might actually find a program that's a better fit for you in a location that you might not have thought about. So I say just be open-minded to the type of experiences that you might have, because they are varied and diverse. So please holler at us at Global Learning or your campus's study abroad office so that we can help you really find the best fit. I think we're out of time at 7:02, so I'm going to move on. Just some final tips and reminders I wanted to say, you know, make sure you research your host culture climate before going on a program, just so you kind of are armed with a little bit information. You should always connect with alumni or other peers. For example, if you're a UCSC student, we can connect you with global learning alumni who have studied in a program that you're interested in. Go to your campus's study abroad office to learn more. And as I just mentioned, just be open and optimistic about the experience. We're here to connect you with resources. We're here to support you 100% along the way. So know that you have that, that community as you're considering global learning. Different campuses have different identity resources on their website. So, you know, if you belong to any of these campuses, make sure you study or check out their identity resources at UC Santa Cruz. We have robust resources that I'm always happy to connect you all with. And I just want to thank everyone for taking the time, giving the energy to participate in tonight's community discussion. I'm always happy to connect with folks. You can visit our website to find programs. You can email me directly to schedule an advising appointment, or you can call our front office and they can get you connected with how to meet with an advisor. So I hope that I get the chance to connect with a few of you soon. Just know these presentation slides and the recording will be sent to you, and that this is part of a bigger collaboration. So I hope you all get the chance to check out some of our other sessions happening this year. Thank you all so much for your attendance. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.